It's chugging along, shouldn't be too long now.
Chair, on my screen, it's now showing that the meeting is now being recorded and it is now on YouTube.
Thanks, Mick. We've just got it up on the screen here, and Vaughan's just waiting. The progress bar is about 80% at the moment, so we're almost there, even if it says that we're already there. Okay, we're live now, so I'll start the meeting. Welcome all, and thanks for attending. Meeting of the Audit, Governance and Ethics Committee. We don't have any apologies for absence. We're quorate and we have everybody here, I believe. Obviously, I can't help you with emergency evacuation procedures other than, you know, saying please leave your house as soon as possible and call 999. Item 3, the declarations of interest. We have none advised. So we'll move on to Chair's business.
Yeah, sorry, can we just get all of the members to introduce themselves so that everybody knows who's on here?
Yeah, I've got that just coming up.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
No worries at all. The meeting, as you have heard, is going to be video recorded and live streamed onto our YouTube channel. And so therefore, by remaining on the call, you are agreeing for your images and voice recording to be posted. So I hope everybody's okay with that. I'm now just going to read out some Zoom guidelines briefly. In view of the current restrictions that COVID-19 has placed on everybody, including the Fire Authority, the meeting of the Avon Fire Authority will take place using Zoom this afternoon. Sorry, that's the meeting of the AJEC committee. To ensure the meeting goes as smoothly as possible, there are several points and guidelines that I would like to run through with members and for the benefit of any members of the public that are watching the live stream of this meeting. Once the meeting begins, attendees will be placed onto mute unless invited to speak by the chair. If you want to speak or have a question, please indicate this by sending a message using the chat function. I'm hoping you can all access that. When I finish this, if anybody can't, you can let me know. This will be monitored by Emma. And at the end of each item, there'll be an opportunity for members to speak in turn. The open section of the meeting will be video recorded and live streamed. Due to the reduction in the length of meetings, it is intended that for reports provided for informational noting, a full discussion will not take place. Please keep any mobile phones on mute to avoid interruptions and interference. And public access statements will not be able to be presented at the meeting by the author, but everybody has, I believe all members have received by electronically the statement, and it will be published along with the minutes of the meeting. There's a time limit of 30 minutes for public access. There is one public access statement that has been received for this meeting, and I will be reading that out myself. Okay, I'm hoping that we can get right the way through to the exempt part of the meeting, where we will close and restart before we have a break. But we will see, obviously, how long things take. And if necessary, we'll have a comfort break before then. Okay, I'd like now to introduce Danielle as the new treasurer, and then so Danielle, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Danielle Neal, and I'll be taking over as the new treasurer from the 1st of June, and look forward to working with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Paul Goggin from Bristol, and I'll be chairing the meeting. Can I ask, please, for members to introduce themselves? I'll go through, if we do it in the order alphabetically. So, John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Councillor John Ash, and I'm from South Gloucestershire Council.
Thank you. And Neil? Neil, I think you're on mute.
Apologies, sorry, I'm Councillor Neil Butters from Bath and North East Somerset.
Thank you very much. Don?
Councillor Don Davis from North Somerset Council.
Thank you. And Trevor?
Yeah, I'm Trevor Jones from South Gloss Council.
Thank you. Robert?
Hello, yes, I'm Robert Payne from North Somerset Council.
Brilliant, thank you. And finally, Richard.
Hello there, Richard Tucker, North Somerset Council.
Thank you very much, everybody. You have to excuse me, sorry, this is my first hosting of a Zoom meeting. So hopefully things will go okay without any technical issues or otherwise. Martin will be the lead for the meeting for the finance items. So Martin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Martin Warburg, and I'm the interim treasurer at Avon Farm Rescue Service.
Thank you very much. Now, everybody should have received a summary of amendments to papers 10, 11 and 12, which have largely arisen from Deloitte's final review processes. If anybody, has anybody not received those papers? Any of the members? No? Okay, that's brilliant. So when we talk about the papers during the meeting, we'll be talking about them with the inclusion of those amendments. And they are also published on the website. And Shazia, who is clerk in the meeting, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, so I'm Shazia Dyer. I'm acting as the clerk for this meeting.
Thank you very much. Now, voting during the meeting, because we're on Zoom and electronic, what I will be doing, if members are happy, is I will be asking for votes against, and then I will be asking for abstentions. I will then assume that if you haven't either voted against or abstained, you are voting for. Is everybody happy with that? Is anybody not happy with that? No? Okay, that's brilliant. So I'll move on to item 5, which is the minutes of the last meeting held way back on 30th of July 2019. Does anybody have any comments or amendments on the minutes? No, that's fabulous. Okay, Emma will email me a copy of the minutes, and then I will confirm in a response that I have virtually approved the minutes. Okay, so we move on to item 6, which is the public access statement, which I shall read out in full. So if you'll bear with me. This is a public access statement by Jenny Gwynn, and I shall read it as it's written. I would like to know if the AGEC has, as promised, improved the accounting knowledge of its members. You have received an unfinalised version of the 2018-19 accounts, whilst being asked to authorise publication of the audited accounts, which have not yet been completed at time of writing, but perhaps they will be presented to you mid-meeting as the new constitution was. Deloitte are presenting a final report on the 2018-19 accounts to you, despite that report stating that their audit continues in many significant areas. Surely it is not within regulations for there to be no further report presented to the AGEC when the audit of the 2018-19 accounts, currently more than 9 months overdue, is actually completed. Regarding the investigations into my 10 concerns presented to you in September 2018, please note when Deloitte states something is not material, that means the item concerned is under £1.3 million in value. Deloitte's report states that it is not their responsibility to look for fraud. Their use of £1.3 million materially would also not be appropriate in an investigation considering fraud. Please note, however, that they should be reporting details of non-trivial matters of around £60,000 or more to you, which doesn't appear to be happening in all cases. SWAP clearly advertised their fraud provision to be reputational protection. The AFA told me that they had not arranged for the promised thorough investigation of items identified by the Local Government Association as having credible potential for fraud and corruption, which both the LGA and Deloitte recommended be done by an independent investigator. Instead, I was told that this would be considered once Deloitte had completed their value for money assessment of my concerns in relation to their audit of the 2018-19 accounts. You are now, as I predicted, being recommended to vote for this not to happen. And just to state that I take no responsibility for the fees charged by Deloitte and SWAP. If Avon Fire and Rescue Service had not denied the problems with the asset register, and also if they had, as promised, engaged an independent investigator with a track record of investigating potential fraud, I suspect the outcome would be more satisfactory and have cost less. Concern one. Sorry, excuse me for a minute. In 2017, I identified errors in the asset register, which were repeatedly denied by Avon Fire and Rescue Service. 9 months after internal auditors tested the reconfigured asset register, Deloitte are still finding and correcting errors. Concern two, SWAP refused to divulge the terms of their investigation. They did no detailed investigation of the numerous disposals of assets for under £10,000 that had much higher book values. I request that SWAP provide the finance and disposal policies and SIPFA regulations to evidence their contention that these were followed. Disposal policy has recently been loosened rather than tightened up. As they mentioned, Avon Fire and Rescue Service had, following my query, admitted the misreporting of appliances as being donated to Gambia, when actually they were donated to private businesses. So clearly I was questioning why assets paid for with public money are being donated to private businesses. Please, having established all vehicles exported, publish the details of these, including description, registration numbers and dates of export. In 2012, Bristol Airport asked for and received an appliance to replace the previously donated one. It was not until I raised this matter that in September 2018, they returned it, saying they no longer needed it. 2 appliances were donated and registered to Airbus UK Fire Service. Avon Fire and Rescue Service was unable to verify whether, after they had finished with them, Airbus would eventually donate them to Gambia. Concern 3. This was totally refuted by Deloitte, claiming a £1,800 profit. At my request, they then amended their 31st of May 2019 report to confirm I was completely correct that £1.3 million of losses had been incorrectly declared in the accounts. It is very concerning that Deloitte have not explained how it came about that Avon Fire and Rescue Service provided them with false information, leading them to their false original conclusion. Concern 4. A house with a value of nearly £250,000 was recorded in the asset register with a value of nil for a number of years. No explanation of how this occurred has been provided, nor why Avon Fire and Rescue Service initially denied this fact. Concern 5. No investigation carried out due to destruction of documents relating to carp appliances. Please will the AFA, the Avon Fire Authority, request that documents are not destroyed so quickly in future, particularly for assets with expected lives much in excess of 6 years. Surely, for example, this could cause problems with making an insurance claim, etc. No investigation of whether Avon Fire and Rescue Service are paying more for their appliances in general. No answer regarding my specific inquiry into why a turntable ladder appliance costing over £600,000 was purchased on the basis of a single tender when Avon Fire and Rescue Service refused to alter their jack type requirements and failed to seek additional tenders from suppliers who could meet this requirement. Concern 6. I recently asked Avon Fire Authority members as to the progress on the insurance claim being made relating to the £425,000 estimated cost of floor repairs caused by faulty building work. This has been dragging on for years. What was the outcome? Concern 7. Deloitte's report of 31st May 2019 says they will give this further consideration. They did not. No evidence of whether the very low rate of interest being received is good compared to rates charged on similar arrangements elsewhere. Concern 8. Please can Deloitte publish details of their appraisal of the business case to demolish all Temple-backed buildings? Can they also provide detailed reports as to the estimated costs of £7 million, in brackets, or £9 million, mainly restructural failings at Temple-back headquarters used to justify the writing off of headquarters buildings and evidence that an insurance claim for this work was looked into? Concern 9. In their report of 31st May 2019, Deloitte denied any problems with valuations of the new Temple-back station. They now report that valuations were wrong and 6- and 7-figure sum errors in recording impairments and revaluations were repeatedly made. Most alarmingly, they report that Avon Fire and Rescue Service management have decided not to correct a £714,000 misstatement in the 2018-19 accounts. Please can this matter be thoroughly looked into? I'm awaiting an explanation of the £498,000 and £266,000 apparently spent on land at Temple-back HQ and station respectively in 2014-15, whilst no land was purchased. Concern 10. This concern continues to be avoided. A £10 million windfall obviously has an effect on finances available for revenue expenditure. As capital grants have virtually ceased, capital costs are largely financed through revenue expenditure. The MRP plus voluntary amounts above this. SWAP's contention that probable future income should be disregarded does not seem to be consistent, as probable future expenditure is not disregarded. And that concludes the public access statement received yesterday, I believe. We will discuss an update on that later in the meeting. I'd like now to move on to item 7, the Statement of Assurance 2018-19. And our Corporate Assurance Manager, Jane, if you could introduce yourself and present that for me, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the Corporate Assurance Manager, Jane Williams-Locke. This report asks members to approve the publication of the Annual Statement of Assurance 2018-19 without the draft watermark, which presently runs through the document. The Statement of Assurance covers 3 key areas, being financial, including the statement on internal financial control, governance, including information relating to external and internal audit, operational, including areas such as integrated risk management planning and our improvement programme going forward. On page 43 of the committee papers, Appendix A provides details of how we meet the requirements of the National Framework for England, along with sources of evidence to demonstrate our compliance with the framework. The Statement of Assurance was originally due to be presented to this committee at the meeting scheduled on the 27th of March. However, due to the impact of COVID-19, the March meeting was postponed. In order to comply with the statutory deadline for publication of the Statement of Assurance, on the 31st of March, using delegated powers, an urgent item was agreed to approve, sign and publish a draft copy of the Statement of Assurance on the service's website pending ratification at the next available committee meeting. No further amendments have been made to this document following its publication, and this is the first meeting of this committee following the use of delegated powers. You will note that the recommendations detailed on the cover report have already been agreed using these delegated powers. However, the draft marker remains on the version published on our website. Therefore, unless members have any questions, the committee is asked to approve the removal of the draft marker from the Statement of Assurance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jane. So the recommendations are that the committee is asked to approve the Annual Statement of Assurance, to recommend that the Chair signs the forward on behalf of the full Fire Authority, and to approve the publication of the statement in accordance with the requirements of the current Fire and Rescue National Framework for England. Now, I'd like to open up to members for any questions or queries that they have on this, please. Okay, if we don't have any questions or queries, I'm going to ask that we ratify the statement and follow the recommendations.
There was a message from Councillor Jones regarding the 4 typos.
Apologies, I've got a message from Councillor Jones. Would you like to speak, Trevor?
Yes, Paul. As I submitted to you earlier, there are 4 minor typos, and I'm happy that if those are put in, then there's no problem with the document as a whole.
Thank you very much, Trevor. They haven't been changed as of yet because we've only just received them, but I can guarantee that they will be changed, and we are asked to ratify the statement with those changes. Okay, does anybody else have anything that they want to say on this? As I say, I'm asking that we follow the recommendations. If anybody, does anybody vote against that? Are there any abstentions?
I'm sorry, Chair. Can we,
yeah.
just so we're very specific on the process, could we have someone to actually move the recommendations and then someone to second, and then just say, as we discussed earlier, about whether or not there are any abstentions and whether everyone agrees with it?
Thanks, Shazia. Okay, can I ask somebody to move that we approve and act on the recommendations, please? I'll propose that then myself. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ash, would you like to second that, please?
Yes, I second it.
Thank you very much. Okay, as I said with the voting procedure remotely, I'm going to ask if there are any votes against. I'm then going to ask if there are any abstentions, and then I'm going to assume that if members have not indicated voting against or abstaining, that they are voting for. Does any of the members have any issues with that, the voting process, before we do it? No? Okay, thank you. So I'll ask for the vote. Are there any votes against carrying out the recommendations? Nothing, thank you. Are there any abstentions? Then I'll say that that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to item 8, the corporate risk register. Again, Jane will be presenting this. And this report is for noting. So Jane, if you could take over, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This report is for noting and provides an update on the extraordinary review of the corporate risk register currently being undertaken. Due to the evolving impact of COVID-19, which has had an impact on our corporate and community risk profiles, the Service Leadership Board have commissioned an extraordinary review of the corporate risk register. The review looks at how each of the corporate risks have changed due to the impact of COVID and whether an adjustment to the mitigations and control measures in place is required. This review will also be linked into the recently formed recovery cell, which main focus will be on how and when we return to business as usual. This review is currently taking place, and the impacts and findings will be presented to members of this committee at the next scheduled meeting in July. Unless members have any questions, that's the end of my update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jane. Okay, that report is for noting, but first I'll ask if there are any questions to Jane on that, please. Okay, we note that report and move on to item 9, the Internal Audit Updated Annual Audit Strategy 2018 to 2022. Jane, again, I'm afraid. Could you present on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report asks members to agree the proposed changes to the internal audit plan for 2020-2021. The internal audit strategy provides an overview of the areas to be audited by the internal audit provider, RSM Risk Assurance Services, during the 2021 audit year. The committee originally approved the internal audit strategy in April 2018. And each year thereafter, we have asked members to review the forthcoming audit plan. It is therefore presented today for the 2020 annual review. I'd like to hand over to Internal Audit to provide a detailed update of the proposed changes to the Internal Audit plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I believe Mark and Vicky are going to present on this.
Yes.
If you could present and just introduce yourself as well, obviously.
Of course. Vicky Gould, Internal Audit Manager with RSM. So this is our updated internal audit strategy and detailed plan for 2021. This has been developed through discussion with management, also reviewing the risk register, looking at sector risks, and also including what we originally said we'd look at in our three-year strategy. It's worth noting that this year there's an additional audit, but that's because the business continuity audit was meant to take place at the end of the previous year. In actual fact, it was the week of the 23rd of March when lockdown happened. So that was pushed back into this year. So there's an additional review. And also worth noting, the governance and assurance piece has already commenced because that was originally approved in last year's plan, but was pushed through to April 2020 to allow the new governance framework to be embedded. We ask members to review this plan, make sure that it meets their assurance needs, make sure that it covers all the key priorities and strategic risks, but also worth noting that this was developed before COVID-19, so whether there's any adjustments that need to be made to reflect that. But as we have done in the previous 2 years, we have an agile approach to our audit plan, so we remain flexible within year to make the amendments.
Thank you, Vicky. Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
No, nothing from me, Chair. That was a good summary. Thank you.
Chair, if I may, I believe you're muted.
Apologies, Mick. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the technology. Yeah, I have a question from Councillor Davis. Don, would you like to?
Oh, hi, yes, sorry, I got a thing up on my screen about an additional muting, so apologies. I mean, thank you for the report. Thanks for the previous report. I just wanted to ask probably Vicky and Mark under item 3.11 on our report of this item about the contingency, and Vicky just did allude to that around the COVID-19. So I think it would be worthwhile tying in the revisions to our corporate risk register into the internal audit work to make sure we are picking up sufficiently the risks associated with the current pandemic and the ongoing. I know it's implied in there and in Vicky's comments that will happen, but I think it should be explicitly stated within the work programme. I appreciate the detail is still to be worked through, but I think if we can put it there and tie it back to our corporate risk register, that would be a very useful marker for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, Vicky, Mark, do you want to come back on that one?
We have regular catch-ups with Angie and Jane, so we can make sure that we are updating the internal audit plan to reflect what's going on within the organisation, and we can report that back to the next meeting.
That would be fantastic. Thank you, Vicky. Okay, the recommendation, the committee is asked to agree the revised internal audit plan. I will propose that we do so. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll do that, Paul.
Thank you, Trevor. Okay.
Chair, could I just say something a minute?
Apologies. Sorry, Councillor Butters.
Sorry, I fully concur with the chairman's comments, Don Davis. I think I'm just wondering if this is an opportunity. There isn't something, I don't think there's anything on the agenda specifically to hang a hook around, but COVID-19 is obviously having a massive effect throughout the whole country, and not least on the fire authority. And at some point, whether it be now or later on, could we just have a brief overview as to how the fire service is coping with this. I know it on the face of it, it seems to be remarkably well, but it would be useful still to have an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Okay,
so can I comment on that?
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Councillor Butters. Yeah, absolutely right. It's important that we do evaluate what we're doing as we go. Members do receive a weekly update from myself in terms of how we are, in terms of our own resilience as an organisation. But it's incumbent upon us, isn't it, to make sure that we capture any lessons learned as we go. We have got a lessons learned log that is being captured, as we move forward by the critical incident management team. That will feed into our evaluation. I think we'll do a formal debrief as well, and do a formal evaluation in that regard. And I think that will dovetail with other evaluations and debriefs that will happen at the local resilience forum level as well. So, and that will be at strategic, tactical, and so on. So I think we will have a really good view as to, how we've done. We know that our resilience is strong and has been to date. But of course, there's always things that you can learn from these things. So we will evaluate as we go, and we will debrief as we go, and we will report to members the outcomes of those.
Many thanks, and many thanks to all your staff for doing such a great job in these trying circumstances. Perhaps that might be edited on our behalf.
I'd like to echo that. Thank you, Neil. And we have been receiving, Mick, from you email updates on how, I know members have been receiving email updates on how COVID is affecting the service, and thank you for those. So if, Vicky, you've said that you will report back in the next meeting, and possibly we could have an update then. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, of course. And also just to note that within the scoping of the audits, we will be looking at kind of business as usual controls, and then also what's changed because of COVID. So we will be able to do that kind of review of the impact of COVID within each individual audit as well.
Thank you very much. Does any of the members have any other questions they'd like to ask on this? No? Okay, thank you very much. So I propose that we agree the revised internal audit plan for 2020-21, bearing in mind that we will be kept updated on how COVID is affecting this. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
Councillor Davis.
Councillor Davis, thank you very much. Would you like to just second that on screen, please?
I'll second that, please.
Thank you very much, Don. Okay, we'll move on to the vote. And again, we will use the same process. I will ask if there are any members who would like to vote against. No, okay, thank you. I would like to ask if there are any members that would like to abstain. No, okay, thank you. So again, the recommendation to agree the revised internal audit plan is carried unanimously. Now we move on to item 10, the public access statement update. I believe Angie is going to present on this. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, Angie, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Angie Feeney. I'm the Interim Director of Corporate Services. I'm just going to run through paper 10, working with Deloitte and also with SWAP. So members, this is a paper coming to you for a decision. There are 4 recommendations outlined in the paper, and primarily the paper asks members to review the external auditor's reports with reference to a public access statement received in September 2018 and confirm whether the investigations you commissioned are now completed to the satisfaction of this committee. I'm going to present the paper in 3 parts. I'm going to first of all recap the investigation process, which was commissioned by the committee. I will then outline Deloitte's conclusions in summary and then hand over to Ian House, who will go through those findings in more detail for your scrutiny. I'll then summarise the management actions that we are taking in response. I will then outline SWAP's conclusions, so Southwest Audit Partnership's conclusions, and hand over to Dan Newlands to go through the findings in more detail for your scrutiny. And I will then summarise the management actions we are taking in response. So going through the first part of that on investigation process, just to recap, 10 concerns were raised by a member of the public in September 2018, and those ones are in Appendix 1 of this report. The committee resolved to seek assistance of the Local Government Association in undertaking an investigation into these issues. The LGA advised a differentiated approach, with us first approaching our external auditor, because some of these matters would need to be resolved as part of the audit of the accounts. And then for others that they weren't dealing with, suggesting internal audit, or if that was not possible, freelance auditors they could identify. At the December 18 AGEC committee, Deloitte confirmed they would be investigating the concerns as part of their audit of the accounts. That was later clarified at the January 19 committee that they would be considering 7 of the concerns, and one of the concerns, number 4, had already been resolved in adjustments to the 17-18 accounts. That left 2 concerns, concern number 2 and number 10, and the committee agreed that they would be investigated by an independent auditor identified by the LGA. On that basis, the Southwest Audit Partnership were appointed. Therefore, the concerns raised have been investigated externally and independently by 2 sets of auditors, and in addition, there has been further testing by our internal auditor with reference to the RAM system. There have been 3 further updates to the committee on the progress of the investigation, and those updates were in March, May, and July 2019. And to date, members have noted those updates and agreed, as per the minutes of the July 19 AGEC approved today, that concern 10, which refers to advice given to the authority with reference to the Templeback capital receipt and its potential impact on decision-making on council tax, there were no issues found, and the committee resolved that that is now concluded. I will now summarise the latest position. So going to the Deloitte investigations. Deloitte have now investigated the 7 concerns from an accounting and/or value for money perspective. The concerns that they have looked at are 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 of the public access statement in your Appendix 1. For concern 5 and 8, they have focused on the value for money aspect. Deloitte have provided a summary of their findings at Appendix 2 of the report, and this summary links across to their final audit of the accounts at agenda item 11 and their previous reports to the May 19 AGEC. In a headline, Deloitte have reported no issues in respect of 3 of the concerns 6, 7, and 8. They are unable to fully investigate concern number 5, and that's because documents on the acquisitions of the CARPs have not been retained. Those acquisitions were 10 to 12 years ago, and we no longer hold those documents, and that is due to retention periods on tender documents, which are determined by regulations, in particular the Public Contract Regulation and Limitation Acts. They have identified issues on the concerns relating to the fixed asset accounting, and those are concerns 1, 3, and 9. And these are technical accounting points due to issues with the RAM software and a lack of effective review controls. Before I hand over to Ian to go through his findings in more detail for you, a few points if I may. The errors in the fixed asset accounting are of course important, and we have needed to correct those measures and put in place actions to ensure that they don't reoccur. And I'll talk more about the work that we've done and the work that we plan to do shortly. However, if I may refer members to pages 3, 6, 9, and 11 of Deloitte's final audit of accounts reports, which is Appendix 1 to agenda item 11, they have confirmed that these technical accounting issues do not impact on the authority's cash base, local taxpayers, or the usable reserves held by the Fire Authority at year end. They have also confirmed there is no impact on the strategic decision-making of the authority or its ability to deliver objectives, and they have said that there is no indication of fraud. Deloitte also do not intend to issue an adverse opinion on our financial statements for 18-19. I will now, that is my overview, but I will now hand over to Deloitte and Ian House to discuss their findings further for member scrutiny. And as I say, following that, I will outline the management actions taken or planned in response. Ian.
Thank you, Angie.
And add my thanks to Angie as well. Good afternoon, members. I'll take you through the points that we found and are reported under each of the concerns. So concern one, you will remember, was to do with an impairment that was recognised in 2008-9. When we reported you in May, we were not clear what had happened on that, and we needed to do some further work. The authority engaged a consultant to come in and look at the real asset management system and the setup of that system to help us understand what may have happened with this large impairment. You will see from our report that actually there was an error made in the setup where an amount was put into a historic cost account rather than a current cost account. And this has led to a number of errors running through the years up until this was identified. Unwinding all of that means that there are adjustments to the accounts for 2017-18 and 2018-19 as set out in our report. Those affect what are called unusable reserves. These are technical reserves within the accounts, but do not impact on the cash position. And there is no evidence from our work that there was anything fraudulent in these. It was simply a mistake in the setup of the system, which has then run through all the years since. And has varying impacts on varying years as you go through, but we've highlighted for you the ones that impact the accounts that we are auditing this year. In terms of concern 3, as Angie reported, we reported that one to you in May, and nothing further has come up, so we consider that one to be closed. Likewise, in concern 5, we couldn't complete the work on that due to the inability to access the original purchase documents. You will see there is mention of the CARP within our audit report in terms of an adjustment, but we couldn't go back to the original documents in this case. Concern 6, this was investigated and reported to you in May, and there is no further update on that one. I will note on concern 7 around the purchase of Temple back, and that the amount that there's some of the amount of the purchase price was outstanding and was referred to as deferred consideration. We've considered the advice that the authority received on that. We have sought evidence from the monitoring officer. The authority had the power to enter into that transaction, and we have no issues to raise of concern in relation to that transaction, and that is confirmed in the work report on our value for money conclusion work within our full ISA 260 report. And that applies to concern 8 as well. In terms of concern 9, there was a mistake in the way in which a revaluation was put through. Our investigation of this uncovered that a PDF of a spreadsheet was sent to the authority for them to process the revaluation. That PDF had some hidden columns in it. And it was only when we looked in real detail at that did we note that there were hidden columns which had affected the numbers that were processed. When we obtained the original spreadsheet and saw the hidden columns, we were able to understand what had gone wrong, and therefore, as you will see, an error went through in the 1 year. It was then corrected with the next upwards revaluation. Shouldn't have happened in the first place, so you ended up with more of a change as a result of the next revaluation than would have been the case. Again, these are items that affect the unusable reserves. They do not impact on the authority's cash or council taxpayers. And again, we found no evidence that this was fraudulent. It appears to have been a mistake in the transposition of the document. And that concludes the detail in relation to our investigation of the concerns that were covered by us.
Thank you, Ian. Angie?
Sorry, Megan.
Sorry.
I'm happy to now turn to the management actions, but Councillor, I didn't know whether you wanted to first ask whether there were any questions for Ian before I move on to management actions in response to that, or do you want to take questions all at the end?
I think we'll just take the questions at the end, if that's okay.
That's fine. So turning back to the management actions that we have taken and planned in response to the Deloitte findings, as indicated by Ian, a number of actions have been taken to correct the errors in the accounting of fixed assets in the RAM system. As reported to the committee in July 19, there's been a comprehensive review of the RAM system, which identified a configuration issue with the initial setup of the system together with some other technical issues. The configuration has now been corrected and errors have been resolved and the data corrected. The internal auditors RSM have also carried out sample testing and based on that concluded the system is now operating accurately. And full information about that RSM audit is in item 13 of the agenda. In addition, both Deloitte and RSM have made a number of recommendations to help prevent a future reoccurrence. These recommendations are repeated in the recommendations in paper 13 and 11. These recommendations are acknowledged and accepted. And in summary, they relate to streamlining and interfacing of the asset management systems across the service, of which we currently have a number, including a review of the continued use of RAM. They also relate to an increase in our review controls over the inputs and adjustments to the fixed asset data in RAM in conjunction with Bristol City Council, RAM and asset owners. So this is about more data checking and reconciliations more regularly at key points in the year. It's also a recommendation about the review of the size, roles, responsibilities and training of the finance team. And this is around refreshing and enhancing the knowledge of the services assets, a refresher on the RAM system and the complex area of capital and fixed asset accounting. And it's about ensuring that they have the skills, systems and tools to support them further with that analysis and those checks within years. And that is supported by the recruitment of the systems accountant. It also relates to a new improved process to review the reasonableness of the assumptions used in the valuation of property assets. So as set out in my report, a management action plan is in place for each of those improvements and is progressing. The transformation team is working to streamline and interface our systems, and we have already looked at one single system called TranMan for all asset management, which will link to the RAM system. In addition, review controls are now in operation with checkbacks from finance asset owners, Bristol City Council and RAM. Training is also planned and in progress, and the recruitment process for the systems accountants is at an interview stage. In addition, as is set out in the audit plan for next year, in 2021, internal audit will be auditing data quality across the service, which is about checking data quality, validation and interfacing of the systems, which will give us another opportunity to make sure that the processes that we are putting in place are operating correctly. And as with all audit actions and recommendations, as well as being monitored by our senior leadership team, it is suggested that progress against these actions are provided to the committee for governance and reassurance, with our first one of those in July. So I think that's the end of the Deloitte aspect of it. I'll now move on to the swap investigation. So swap has investigated concern 2 and 10 as commissioned by the authority. The authority's finding on concern 10 was reported to this committee in July. The committee agreed that this concern had been subject to a suitably thorough investigation and was now concluded. The auditors conclude that members had been provided with full information to make well-informed decisions with reference to the council tax in 1819, and they provided no recommendations. SWAP's finding on concern 2 is set out in full in Appendix 3 of this report. And in outline, on page 1 of their report, they've given a reasonable assurance level, but identify some areas for improvement which they note are already complete, planned, or in progress. It is also of note that on page 1 of their report, SWAP have identified Their audit has gone wider than the original focus. They have found no instances which suggest the involvement of fraudulent activity. On page 10 of their report, they also indicate that the financial regulations of standing orders at the time have been complied with. So again, I will now hand over to Dan Newens of SWAP to set out the findings on concern 2 in more detail for member scrutiny. And following that, I will outline the management actions taken or planned in response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Angie. Dan, would you like to just introduce yourself first, please?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Angie, and thanks, Chair. So yeah, to introduce myself, my name is Dan Newens. I'm a Principal Auditor for SWAP Internal Audit Services, and I'm also a qualified certified internal auditor. I was responsible for undertaking this work, also with the support of SWAP Assistant Director and Fraud Lead Jackie Gooding and SWAP Assistant Director Moya Moore. So just to outline the scope of the work, we were commissioned to undertake a review of point 2 of the public access statement. To start this work, we held a meeting with the complainant in June 2019 to discuss the concerns raised. I will take the report as read, however, I will work through some sections of it. I'm more than happy to take any questions at the end. So, as Angie has identified, page 1 in the executive summary, we have provided a reasonable audit opinion. We have also made 2 recommendations. However, whilst these recommendations have been made, there were no instances found that would suggest the involvement of fraudulent activity on behalf of Avon Fire and Rescue Service. Pages 3 to 6 go into a bit more detail as to some of the findings and the work undertaken. I will pick this up at the foot of page 6, which outlines the 2 recommendations. So the first recommendation is with regard to ensuring that there is a clear documented asset disposal policy in place, making sure that this is consistent and transparent and including consistent sign-off processes which can be evidenced. The second recommendation is with regard to 5 appliances which were donated to Gambia in 2010. On the DVLA website, they did not have export markers. As Angie has already alluded to, actions are already being taken to implement both these recommendations, and I'll pass back to Angie to update you on those, but again, I'm more than happy to take any further comments that you may have.
Thank you very much, Dan. Angie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the management actions referred to on page 6, as the matters under investigation of some time ago, a number of improvements have already been made with reference to disposal of assets. And as members will know, in response to the statutory inspection report, there was a procurement and transport improvement team set up with various objectives around ensuring economy, efficiency and effectiveness in this area. And that programme of work had a number of strands, including disposals of redundant vehicles. And that programme of work has been signed off as complete by members and an external scrutiny board. Specifically on disposals, a paper went to members in July 18, where members agreed an approach on vehicle disposals. And members will have seen since the have since seen that we have applied that agreed process in June 19 with reference to the donation of vehicles to the Gambia. And that process ensures that there are clearly options to find recipients and external valuations of the appliances in a documented decision-making trail, which ties in with the recommendations of SWAP. There's also a draft asset management policy being progressed at the moment by the head of procurement. This will restate the agreed approach on disposals, but will also go wider. It's a framework which covers the life cycle of assets from purchase, additional expenditure, conversion and disposal, underpinned by interfacing systems, asset registers. And it also talks about governance and decision-making infrastructures, including the member capital steering group, which has been relatively newly established. As part of the transformation programme, we are investing in TranMan as a integrated system for asset tracking, which will interface with RAM or its replacement. And as Appendix 4 in your paper also contains the letter to the DVLA to ensure the 5 appliances highlighted in the report have the correct export markers on their systems. SWAP have concluded that there is evidence that they were donated to the Gambia, and the DVLA haven't been chasing us for tax or anything, so they are aware that they have also been donated, but they just need to catch up with their administration and check and do the export markers. As with the Deloitte actions, it's recommended that these audit recommendations now form part of our usual follow-up processes where progress against the audit recommendations are reported to the committee. So I think to finally sum up, all 10 concerns raised by the member of the public have now been independently investigated. We've now received their reports and their findings. They've been clear on their position about the impact of the errors and that they have found no indication of fraud. And I've outlined the actions being taken or planned to address each of the areas and recommendations highlighted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Angie. If I can just thank the member of the public for bringing these concerns to us. They identified issues to be addressed by management, and we've heard the progress on those. I'd like to now ask for questions from members. If you can just indicate that you would like to ask a question and who you would like to ask it to.
Councillor Butters.
I believe Councillor Butters is first. Who would you like the question to, Neil?
Well, thanks. I think my hand was up from before, but never mind.
Apologies.
No, it's probably my fault. But I was going to ask a couple of questions, though I'm not quite sure of whom. But could somebody possibly summarise the benefits that have accrued to the authority from the investigation of these various matters? I assume they can be quantified, but it would be helpful to know how much use they have been. And secondly, it's obviously very disappointing to hear that the member of the public has come up with another raft of concerns, and how can these be best addressed? Thank you.
Okay, who would like to answer that, please?
I will answer, and then if Deloitte wish to come in with reference to their final audit of account. It has been really useful to get the concerns in from the member of the public. It's enabled us to take a really good look at our fixed asset accounting and to make sure that our accounts are accurate in this regard, going backward and also forward. And for us, it is identified, as I've kind of indicated, some training needs kind of within the team, and the need to look at the size and shape of that team as part of our, as we always do around our team structure and size around risk. So for me, it has been very important that it's enabled us to have a look at that, and also for Deloitte to be satisfied with our accounts.
Thank you.
Ian, do you want to add anything to that?
Firstly, Chair, I must acknowledge the diligence with which the member of the public must have gone through the records available to her in order to identify the issues that were brought to our attention. Clearly, a lot of work has gone into that, and that has really helped us identify some significant points within the fixed asset register that needed addressing, and that allows the authority to have a much clearer position of how it accounts for its capital items. Unfortunately, it doesn't free up any cash, it doesn't create anything new or any new assets to deliver the service with, but it does put us in a much better position in terms of the accounting records, which are key in terms of compliance with what needs to be done in accounting. I have had the full commitment of the management team that we should not rush this. We should do it in the detail that was required to get it right. And the Chief Fire Officer has been unequivocal in that it has to be right. We have to get to a point where we know where we are with our accounting records around fixed assets. I hope those members who went to the training on capital accounting will have a greater appreciation of some of the complexity that I tried to describe to you at the last audit committee. And indeed will understand some of the points that we make in our final report as a result of that as well.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Neil, did you want to come back on that at all?
No, I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you. So what do we do about the latest raft of issues?
If we can just go through these first, while we've got the people to answer the questions here, and then we'll. I think the latest questions are on the same subjects, are they not? Neil?
Well, a lot seem to be here.
Okay.
Yeah, if it will assist, I did speak to Angie yesterday, and I think what we'll do is deal with that as a complaint through the usual processes of the authority, because actually the information you have before you today will enable you to hopefully finalise how you want to deal with these 10 issues, but we will take the other aspects that have been raised as a separate issue.
Thanks.
Chairman, if I might add, my understanding is there was originally 10 questions put before members raised at previous subject access requests, and quite rightly the committee took those questions on board and commissioned myself as the Chief FOR Officer and us as officers to effectively answer those questions and ask somebody independent to take a view on those questions, which is before members today. The latest subjects access request deals with the same 10 issues. So my understanding is that those questions have been answered. Those questions are before members today to consider. And I think for members to need to be satisfied that the 10 questions that were originally answered have been fully investigated independently and are answered to the satisfaction of members today. The latest subject access request, of course, is incumbent upon us to have a look at that, and of course, but it will only be for new information or for new areas. And I do think it's appropriate, as the clerk has said, that we do treat that as a freedom of information request, because there are some questions in there, and that we answer those in the normal way as we would do from a request from a member of the public for information from us as a public authority. So, but it would only be for the new things, because I believe that the 10 concerns and the 10 questions have been answered. But that, of course, is for members to determine through your discussions and considerations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mick. Neil, did you want to come back on that?
No, I mean, that's fine. It's a very complex issue, but we seem to be gradually working our way through this logically. And many thanks for all those who put so much hard work into it, and hopefully, between everybody, including the member of the public, the overall cause of the authority is advanced.
Thank you, Neil. I've now got a question from Richard, I believe, on item 5 or question 5.
Yes, thank you, Paul. It was mentioned that there was a legal period for which we should keep the documents. I don't know if I missed it in the report, that whether that was mentioned. I gather it dates back about 10 to 12 years from what you said, Angie, but just to sort of clarify what that legal position is in terms of retaining the documents, please.
Thank you. I think it's 6 years, but I'll just ask Angie to confirm that.
Yeah, we've reviewed all of our retention periods with reference to GDPR, and the current position is that it's now 7 years rather than 6 years. But the basis for that, and therefore what we follow in the GDPR, is the legislation that I kind of referred to, which is Public Contract Regulations and Limitation Acts, and that sets how long we keep certain documents, and in particular in terms of tenders and specifications. So that's where it's not a service imposed or decided retention period. It is based on the relevant bits of legislation around that.
Thank you, Richard. Oh, sorry, Martin, you'd like to come in.
Yes, just to confirm, the retention of documents also need to comply with tax legislation, which requires you to retain documents for 6 years plus the current year. So in effect, 7 years.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, and also, if I may, Chair, obviously in response to Councillor Butters and to re-echo what the auditor said, it's obviously clearly very important that the accounts reflect the correct accounting regulations, and therefore it has been very important that we have made these adjustments.
Thank you, Martin. Richard, are you happy with the answer?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. 6 to 7 years seems to be the par, doesn't it? So yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this point for anybody? No? Okay. Now, I think at this point, the recommendations are that we review the Deloitte report and confirm that this effectively concludes the investigation of 7 of the concerns raised in the public access statement. The second recommendation is to review the swap report and confirm that this effectively concludes the investigation of 2 of the concerns raised in the public access statement. The third recommendation is to confirm that the investigation into the public access statement is complete and no further investigation into these matters is required. And the fourth recommendation is to confirm that a follow-up report will be provided to the committee's meeting in July, outlining progress against the management actions identified in this report, with further reports to be provided to each AGEC until the actions are completed. So I'd like to open all of the recommendations to debate. Does anybody want to come in and talk on this, please? Any of the members? No? Okay. Well, then I will propose that we approve the recommendations as I've just read out. Review the Deloitte report and confirm that this concludes the investigation of 7 of the concerns. Review the swap report and confirm that this effectively concludes the investigation of 2 of the concerns. Confirm that the investigation into the public access statement is complete and no further investigation, that's the original public access statement, is complete and no further investigation into these matters is required. And to confirm that a follow-up report will be provided in July and to following meetings. I will propose that we approve those recommendations. Would anybody like to second that?
I will, Paul.
Thank you, Trevor. Okay, I'll move to a vote on this then, please. And again, I will ask for votes against and abstentions, and I will assume that anybody that doesn't vote against or abstain is voting for. So if I could ask, please, for votes against adopting the recommendations. Nothing, thank you. Could I ask for any abstentions? None, thank you. Okay, I confirm that the recommendations are approved unanimously. Thank you. So we'll move on now to item 11, which is the External Audit Opinion and Statement of Accounts 2018-19. And I believe Martin is presenting on this one, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, the audited statement of accounts for 2018-19 were due to be published by the 31st of July 2019. At the meeting in July, members agreed to delay the publishing on the statement of accounts until September 2019 due to a number of issues, including the Supreme Court ruling in what is commonly known as the McLeod case after the year end, which impacted on the values of pension liabilities disclosed in the accounts, which actually ultimately needed to be changed. The issues, as we have heard about the fixed asset management system, and also the accounting treatment that had been applied to the deferred capital receipt following the disposal of the HQ site at Temple Back. As reported separately to members at the July meeting, the issues identified, and as we've just discussed, the issues identified with the asset management system were corrected, and the system has now been separately and independently tested by both internal audit RSM and the external auditors Deloitte, who have reported that our system is now working as expected. Although the resulting adjustments have not impacted on the authority's cash balances, so they have not impacted on the authority's cash balances, as we have already heard, or the amount collectible from local taxpayers or the usable reserves held by the Foreign Authority. They are technical in nature and have been compounded by the fact that these adjustments have gone back many, many years, and it's taken a while to unwind. Due to the availability of audit resources and the technicalities, and also the change in audit manager during the period, this has meant that finalising the audit opinions has taken a little longer than originally expected. If I may, I will now pass over to Ian Howes of Deloitte to go through the auditor's ISA 2260 report, and to take any questions on that report, to then returning to highlight the actions that have been taken or are being taken to resolve the issues that the auditors have raised. So if I could pass over to Ian.
Thank you, Martin. Ian?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Martin, for that introduction. As Martin says, this obviously has gone on long beyond normal timeframes in terms of sign-off. You're not the only authority to be in that situation. I believe the last time I saw it, there were more than 30 across the country from 2018-19 that had not yet been signed. So you're not on your own, and you're obviously aware of the issues that have been ongoing in terms of us understanding the capital accounting entries in particular in order to get to the final position. And as I stated, it has been with the agreement of the management team that it is really important we got to the right answer, and that was more important than rushing to get to an opinion. We've set out here for you what we call our ISA 260 report, which is the international standard on auditing, and is aimed to communicate with those charged with governance yourselves, the outcome of our audit. You will see on the status of the audit, at the time of writing, there were a number of points outstanding. A couple of those remain outstanding, so I would say to you that the detailed work is now complete, but there are some of the I's to dot and T's to cross just to finish off our audit file. I don't envisage them having an impact on the accounts, but they do need to be done. So that is just to raise the point that we haven't quite finished, but the work is substantially complete. We've identified a number of issues with the accounts, as we've heard from some of the work in relation to the public access statement and some other things that we've discovered as we've worked through the audit. As has been said, these adjustments have not changed the general fund or cash balances of the authority, but they did lead to us raising a new significant risk around capital accounting. So when we reported to you earlier in the year, that wasn't a significant risk area when we originally did our planning, but we decided, given everything that was coming to light, that we needed to do additional work on that. We've completed our work on value for money arrangements, and we have issued an adverse opinion in relation to your arrangements for acting in the public interest through demonstrating and applying principles and values of sound governance, and evidence of weaknesses in proper arrangements to plan, organise and develop the workforce effectively to deliver strategic priorities. You will see that it is driven in part by the need to finish off or complete the actions arising from the original best value inspection and from some of the findings of HMIC FRS. I will stress to members that our opinion looks across the whole year of 2018-19. We're not looking at where you are now, so you may well, and indeed, you know, there's evidence that you have completed a lot of the actions, and some of the actions that were outstanding were completed sort of 3/4 of the way through the year, but we're looking at arrangements that are in place throughout the year. So I'm sure you feel it's a little bit harsh that we're saying, you know, you haven't achieved some of those VFM arrangements, because you have obviously been on the journey of improvement with a lot of focus from you as members and from the management team on improvement. But I just wanted to stress we're looking at just at that period, and that the arrangements need to be in place substantially for all of the year in order to count as being there at the time. And that's a really important point for you to understand. Moving on, we've heard mention of our materiality in the public access statement. That is 1.3 million. That's a level above which we said if there was an error greater than that in the accounts, we believe it really would change the view of a reader of the accounts. That amount is the same as when we planned the audit and hasn't changed, so it's important for you to understand. I want to bring that to your attention. But it doesn't mean to say that those are the only things we report to you. We report to you at all misstatements above £65,000 that we've identified through our audit. We had a significant risk around property valuations, which is the next page and talks you through how your assets are valued and the assumptions that go into that. The valuation of properties in in your sector is quite complex. There are these things like modern equivalent asset valuation, which was described to you at the planning. It is a bit of an unusual thing. It doesn't value the property as you see it in front of you. It values the property you would replace that property with if it were not available to you, and makes assumptions around whether that would be different in shape, form, size, how many floors there are, the size of corridors, and all sorts of things. It's a very complex methodology, but it is consistent across the sector. So we need to understand the assumptions that have been made, and we've used some specialists in real estate valuation to help us understand that. We did find that there were some controls you need to improve in that area in how you assess the work of the valuer. So you use a professional valuer, but it's around how do you challenge that value before you put them into your accounts. And as you will have seen from some of the findings earlier on, there were some examples where the valuation was put incorrectly into the accounts, and therefore that led to some errors as we worked through it. But we're happy now with the values that are presented in the accounts to you today in terms of the valuation of assets. Capital accounting, we said, is a new risk that we've identified after we did the plan. We set out there our proposed response and the key controls around capital accounting. And we note, as you would imagine, given the issues we found, there are some areas where you can strengthen the controls around your capital accounting, and they're in our control recommendations later on. We outlined there the issues with the RAM system, which we've already discussed as part of the public access, so I won't repeat those for the sake of members' time. We talked there about the new Temple back station as well in terms of the transaction there. And as I mentioned earlier on, in assessing the value for money of this, we looked at the advice received by the authority in terms of what the market was available, the options that were available for the purchase of the site, and whether they took into account that, whether they looked at the legal powers to do it, and we have no issues to report to you in relation to that sale. Neither do we have any issues to report to you in relation to the way in which the receipts were split between an upfront receipt and a receipt in the future. And I believe the conclusion of that future receipt is quite close to being resolved. I'll carry on. There were some additions that weren't correctly put through into the accounts, and one asset which it was a bit complicated in terms of the carp, in terms of the chassis being repurposed, and just the way in which that was accounted for needed tidying up as well. And that's another one which we've referred to as double counting of assets. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but essentially that, you know, you ended up with the chassis looking like it was in there twice. In terms of completeness of creditors and accruals, there were no material issues noted in relation to that, so that's really good. Management override of controls. This is where we have to assume that management are in a position to manipulate the accounts deliberately. Having carried out our testing, we found no evidence of that. So I just want to be very clear about that. We have found areas where the controls need to be improved, but we didn't find any evidence of management override. The next slide is around value for money, and I've covered off the issues there. We set out in more detail what we've looked at, but essentially the two areas that led us to a modified opinion were around the best value inspection and HMIC FRS. And we set out the wording of what that will look like there as well. Pension schemes, Martin's already mentioned the McLeod judgment. All accounts ended up with an adjustment for this McLeod judgment, because when everybody prepared their accounts last summer, they weren't aware of this, and so therefore all of the accounts that we signed off up until this date will have had an adjustment for this. There was also an adjustment of something that had been put through in 1 year, some years ago now, and then just kept being put through by error, which had understated the pension liability. That has now been corrected and worked through as a correction in the accounts, both in the prior period and the current period. We then reiterate the points that we've already discussed on the public access. We list out there a number of control weaknesses, and you will have seen in the papers that we've received, management are already progressing an action plan to deal with those recommendations that we have made in this report, which is a very positive position, what we always like to see. There is quite a lot there. I've set out then in the appendices the audit adjustments, some unadjusted misstatements. Given that was raised in the latest public access, it's worth us addressing those. What we say is sometimes we will come across an amount that is less than our materiality, and therefore we don't think if you don't change it, it won't affect the readers of the accounts interpretation of what it is. Again, it is a movement between unusable reserves, and therefore those two lines combine into one line in the statement of financial position. And so therefore we're not concerned that it is not adjusted, and actually sometimes there's genuine reason not to adjust, because what happens is that when you adjust a number in the accounts, it can flow through to so many different places that the administrative burden of correcting it really doesn't pay dividends, and it is not worth doing. So we're happy that that is not adjusted there. There were quite a number of adjusted errors as well, and they're set out in the audit adjustment section, most of which we've already discussed as we've worked our way through the document, but they're there to inform you. We do set out our fraud responsibilities on the next page. It's not a primary objective of our audit, but obviously we're always on the lookout for anything that has indications of fraud when we're carrying out the work. And we just reconfirm our independence at the end, which is a very critical part of the audit, to let you know that we are completely independent of the authority. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Ian. And although obviously there were adverse parts of the report, it's nice to see that you've acknowledged the recognition of the work already done and the progress to correct those issues, and also the reassurance that no fraud. Thank you. Right, what I will do now is ask, sorry, Martin, did you want to come back in?
Yes, certainly, Chair. All I was going to, just to conclude, is to thank Ian for a very comprehensive report. I think, as already mentioned, management have accepted and taken on board all the comments that Deloitte have made, and we have set out our planned action plan on pages 5 to 12 of the report. That's broadly all I wanted to say. The only thing I would like to add, if I may, is that under normal circumstances, once the committee have approved the accounts, then they would be signed by the chair and the treasurer. As this is a virtual meeting, separate arrangements will need to be made to get these physically signed. And also, as Ian is quite rightly pointed out, the auditors are currently carrying out their final review of the documents. So it's only a final review of what the amended documents look like. So it may be that a few minor amendments may still result as come out as a result of that review. It is therefore that the recommendation under these circumstances is that the committee actually agreed to delegate the decision to sign and publish the final version of the accounts to the chair and the treasurer once any amendments that have been subject, of course, to any amendments that the auditors come up with, not having a material impact on the statement of accounts as already presented to members today. I hope that is clear.
Thank you very much. And I believe that the reports will likely be finished next week.
Yes, Chair, that's the intention, and we will issue a very final updated version of the document that I've just run through to confirm to all members. So you'll be able to circulate to all members to confirm, and they will be able to see then if there anything has changed, it would be very clearly set out in there. And obviously, if we felt there was a material change to it, we would bring that back to a full members, but I very much doubt that.
Thank you, Ian. I'd like to open up to questions now from members. Does anybody have any questions for Martin or Ian? No? Okay, that's good. What I'd like to propose, as Martin said, is that the committee delegate to myself as chair and Martin as treasurer, as long as there are no material changes, that we approve and sign the accounts when they are ready next week. If there are any material changes, I will not approve them, and I will make sure that they're brought back to the next meeting. Does anybody have any comments or questions on that particular process?
Nothing on track, Chair. Nothing in chat.
Thank you. Nothing in chat. Okay. So I will recommend that the committee delegate to myself and the treasurer, the chair and the treasurer, to authorise the accounts when they are available next week, and to confirm publication. And as I said, if there are any material changes, I will not authorise them, and they will be brought back to the next AGEC meeting. So that's my proposal. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Yes, I'll second it.
Thank you, John. Okay, I'll move on to the vote. Sorry, Ian.
No, please carry on with the vote. It's not relevant to that bit. Just after you've done that, I'd like to come in if I may.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Okay, I'll move on to the vote. The decision is to delegate to the chair and the treasurer to authorise and publish the accounts if there are no material changes to the report that you have already received when they are completed next week, and then they will be passed through to Ian to sign as well. Can I have any votes against that, please? Okay, nothing. And can I ask if anybody would like to abstain? No, thank you. So again, I confirm that unanimously the committee has agreed to delegate to the chair and the treasurer to authorise the accounts when they are available next week. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to item 12, which is update to the annual government's statement 2018, 2019. Sorry, apologies.
Yes, Chair. Sorry, just in terms of 1920, to reassure members that we have already done an interim piece of work in relation to the 1920 accounts. We have had discussions with Danielle around the timing of that. Due to COVID-19, there is a longer period for the accounts approval this year and doesn't need to be done until the end of November. But we're agreeing a timetable to ensure we can meet that this time. And work is already progressing very well with Danielle in order to arrange for that audit to take place. And I just thought it'd be important for members to be aware that now we can get 1819 out of the way, we can rapidly move on with 1920.
Thank you very much, Ian. And I think that's your last contribution. So you're welcome to stay on, obviously, but otherwise you can log off and enjoy your afternoon. Okay, I'll move on to item 12, updates to the annual government statement 2018-19. And I believe Jane is presenting on this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report asks members to review the proposed amendments to the annual governance statement 2018-19 and confirm the publication of the amended statement on our website. The annual governance statement was originally published on the 31st of May 19. However, due to the passage of time, there has been a need to review the governance statement to ensure it is fully consistent with the financial documents being presented today. A review has been carried out, which included responding to questions raised by external audit. On page 4 of the cover report, Appendix A provides a summary of the questions raised by external audit, together with a management response and proposed amendments to the governance statement as a result. Prior to this meeting, external audit have requested an additional amendment to be made to the statement to include information regarding the top 3 corporate risks impacting the service, along with a list of planned mitigations to minimise the risk to the authority. The additional information has been circulated to members for consideration, and a revised version of the governance statement has been uploaded onto our website. Unless members have any questions, this is the end of my update on the governance statement.
Thank you, Jane. I now believe, sorry, I'll ask for questions on that from members. Does anybody have any questions for Jane on that one?
Is the chair frozen?
Yeah, he seems to be.
Emma, we seem to have lost the chair of the committee in on the stream.
Can we still hear him? That's the key.
No, not at the moment, no. Emma, he might have to use your computer by the sounds of it.
Martin, can I just take this opportunity to ask, is it okay if I leave the meeting now?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Russell. Thanks for your help.
No problem. Thank you. Bye all.
Okay, sorry, we've had a few technical issues here, but I believe that I'm back online. So yeah, we're at item 12 and I'm calling for the vote. I am proposing that we approve the recommendation to review the proposed amendments to the annual governance statement and confirm publication of the amended statement. Can I have a seconder for that? Would anybody like to second that, please?
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Don. Okay, I'll move to the vote. And again, I will ask for votes against and abstentions. So are there any votes against accepting the recommendation? No, thank you. Are there any abstentions? No. Okay, so again, that is passed unanimously. And we'll move on to item 13, the internal audit progress report and 2019-20 audit findings update. And Jane, I think again, you have the pleasure on this one.
Chair, could I just advise everyone that Danielle has unfortunately had a power cut in her area, which has dropped her out of the meeting. So she sends her apologies to you, Chair. She's not quite sure how long that's going to take and when she'll be able to be back with us.
Thank you, Angie. Sorry to hear that. Okay, so we'll move on to item 13, and this is Jane to present on this one.
Thank you, Chair. This report asks members to review the summary of the internal audit progress report and the detailed audit reports received, and to confirm that the management actions are appropriate to address the audit recommendations. On page 60 of the committee papers, Appendix A provides an update on the progress made against the 2019-20 audit plan and summarises the internal audit's work to date. The audit reports being presented to members today are health and safety estates and equipment, financial management controls, and the real asset management system. A follow-up report which will outline the progress made against the management actions for the 19-20 audit will be provided to the next committee meeting scheduled in July. If I may, I would like to hand over to internal audit to provide a detailed update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jane. Can I ask for Vicky to come back on this one?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so going through our papers, we have the progress report up first. This summarises the work that we've done since the last meeting, and the plan to complete the 1920 internal audit plan. So section 2 summarises the 3 reports that I'll go through shortly that have been finalised since the last meeting, and any themes arising from our work to date. Appendix A sets out the plan for delivery of the rest of the 1920 plan. Just to inform you, HR absence management has since been finalised, and we're just waiting on management responses on the follow-up, and that will conclude the audit plan. To note, Appendix B, the changes, so asset management, which I'll talk through shortly, was using up the contingency allocation for the year, and as a result of the public access statement. Governance and assurance was pushed back into Q1 of this year. HR absence management was pushed back to the end of the year, and the business continuity was cancelled at the last minute due to the COVID outbreak, and that will take place later on in this year. So any questions on that report?
Thank you, Vicky. Do members have any questions to either Jane or Vicky? No? Okay. Thank you very much. So the recommendation, sorry. Oh, sorry, I have Don, Councillor Davis.
Sorry, too many buttons. Can I go all the way down to page 125 within the report? If you feel I can be on a laptop, it's a very, very long way down. It refers to the supplier accounting, which is done by Bristol City Council, and the lack of controls therein that flows information backwards and forwards between Bristol City Council as our account holders and the fire service. And I know that there are some points raised about the controls there, but it just concerned me a little bit that some of the things we've heard in the previous transactions about PDFs coming back with hidden columns and things like that, the level of control there is sufficiently strong. I don't know if that's for Vicky or for Jane to answer.
Thank you, John. Would either of you come back on that one, please?
I might be able to help with that first, and then Vicky, if you come in sort of after that, if that's okay, Chair. There is a specific action on that in the action plan, which was about working with Bristol City Council to arrange for monthly reporting to form part of the SLA and to also do more reporting on supplier data. We're still working on the SLA, but we have put in place a manual workaround at the moment in terms of checking the reports on supplier data with Bristol City Council. So that was an action to be completed by the 31st of March, and I confirm that has been completed. So we are working much more closely with them now to check the data they hold on suppliers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Vicky or Mark, would you like to come back any further on that?
Just skipping through to that financial controls report, I think the high level summary would be that a lot of our findings reflect where we've benchmarked against good financial management, and where the contract with Bristol City Council has been in place for quite a long time. It's just reflecting that kind of forward-looking view that there are emerging risks, and supplier fraud and supplier data is one of those areas where there's emerging risks. We need to kind of keep up to date with that and enhance our control framework along with emerging risks in that area. And it's the actions are very forward looking around how the control framework and the contract with Bristol City Council will allow for that.
Thank you, Vicky. Do members have any questions for Angie or Vicky on that? No? Okay, thank you. Well, the recommendations are that the committee is asked to review the summary, the internal audit progress report and the detailed internal audit reports received, and confirm that the management actions are appropriate to address the recommendations. We are also asked to note that a follow-up report will be provided to the next AGEC outlining progress against the management actions recommended in the 1920 audits. And for the third recommendation, note that the concluding internal audit report for 2019-20 will be presented to the next AGEC meeting with an insurance rating for that audit year. Does anybody have any comments on that? No? Okay, well, I propose that we accept the recommendations as I've just stated. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
Richard Tucker.
Richard?
Happy to second that. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move to the vote. I'll ask again if there are any votes against. Are there any abstentions? Again, it's unanimously passed to accept the recommendations on item 13. Okay, we'll move to item 14, which is the summary, verbal update and next steps. And I think this one's back to Angie.
Thank you, Chair. Members have considered a number of linking reports, and I thought it might be useful to summarise and outline next steps and look forward to the next AGEC. So as you've heard in the report, both external auditors have outlined some issues and risks with our accounts, in particular fixed assets accounting. And whilst there's no indication of fraud or impact on cash for the authority, there's clearly areas for improvement which we acknowledge and accept. And we also, as we said, acknowledge the work of the member of the public to identify and raise the issues with fixed asset accounting so they can be corrected in our accounts. And I've taken out and I've set out the work we've already done to make the improvements and correct the errors and management action plans going forward. I think linking that into the health and safety and the financial accounting internal audit reports, while the reports today have focused primarily on finance, I think if you map them across, they also have similar themes for us with reference to ways of working, systems, having too many systems old and not interfacing, and a need for streamlined but clear and consistent policies and procedures, and looking at the capacity and training of our staff. And so for me as the temporary director of corporate services, and for us as a leadership team, those themes also reflect the work which has already been identified in the authority's service plan and transformation programme, where we've made commitments to digitise our service, streamline and clarify our policies and procedures, further invest in staff development and training, and ensure that resources in our teams match the level of risk. So therefore, to conclude, I'd like to thank all of those involved in this work, and with the statement of accounts and public action statement investigation now signed off as complete by members, look forward to the next committee and just give an indication of a couple of the key documents will be going to that next committee. So as well as the follow-up report that we've already indicated, we'll look at where we are with our audit action plans. And the next committee, we will also be looking at our recovery plan in respect of COVID-19, and we'll be looking at that through the lens of our corporate risk register, which of course is a specific responsibility in the constitution for this committee. And we'll also be looking at a draft governance and assurance framework, which Jane has put together for 2020-23, which brings around a number of things around good governance and practice. So it was just a sort of sum up for me and a look forward to the next AGEC in July. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Angie. And I'd like to say something again at this point. I'd like to again thank the member of public for raising these concerns. I think we have taken all measures to identify any evidence of fraud. We have taken this very seriously. We have, as Angie has just said, and I would also like to echo her thanks to the people that have worked on this. We've put an incredible amount of work in this. Action plans are in place. There was, from all the reports, no evidence of any fraud or actual cash difference. I'd like to ask the committee to just to comment, if possible, if you would like. How do you feel that we have answered the queries to your satisfaction? Personally, as chair, I believe the queries have been answered, but I would be interested in hearing members' views if you have any. Does anybody have a comment to make on this? Nobody? Okay.
Don.
Don, apologies. Sorry, Don.
Yes, I mean, I think it's, having been involved in this now since, was it 2017 as the chair, and all everything that's gone through. I mean, thank you very much to everyone that's put efforts into this. I think it's highlighted there was too much sloppy practice in the past, and I think everybody here has been working very hard to recognise those errors and to get them right. So thank you very much, everybody. As you quite rightly say, Paul, the accusations around fraud and financial mismanagement, it seems to have been well and truly put to bed by this. So I'm quite happy that the questions have been answered. Clearly, there's a political element to all of this, and I think we need to make very much the case that we're answering the factual accounting and control questions as opposed to people's opinions on what went on in the past. Most of which none of us were on the fire authority, employed by the fire authority, when those things were happening. So I would very much welcome this as saying we've answered those questions, but clearly there's an awful lot still to be done. I mean, Vicky's report in terms of some of the controls that we need to have, give us more work which is being done. I'd like to welcome the fact we've recognised that it isn't right, and we are trying to put it correct now to correct it. And that's work that's going to continue into the future, and people should all be very much taking seriously their work on the audit committee and in the internal controls and the external controls to make sure we do a good job. So thank you all. This is work in progress, but I feel that with the original set of questions that were asked, particularly around the capital accounting, have been answered. They've shown up shortfalls and any inadequacies, and we've dealt with those, and we're now taking them forward with much stronger operation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. And Neil, I believe Councillor Butters, you have a comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I spoken on this earlier in the meeting, of course. As you know, I'm grateful for the work put in by the member of the public and particularly a whole range of officers, of course, and other bodies in producing answers. Very glad that we've moved forward on this, but at the end of the day, I don't think we can be completely satisfied until we don't get a new raft of questions at each meeting. So I think we have to all work towards that whilst acknowledging what has been done. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. And as was said earlier, obviously any new concerns we will investigate separately. Any new information that comes to light or is supplied, we will take very seriously and we will look into. But again, as Don said, I think the original 10 queries have been answered. So I'd like to move on to item 15, which is just the date of the next meeting. And I propose that the meeting is held on the 26th of June at 10:30 a.m. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Neil. Are there any votes against having it? No, no abstentions. Then that will be the date, 26th of June at 10:30. We will now move into the exempt session. So at this point, I would like to propose that we close the meeting, have a 5-minute comfort break, and then restart the meeting to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business on the grounds that they contained exempt information pursuant to Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972, and that in accordance with Schedule 12A, Part 2, Paragraph 10 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. And I believe, Councillor Davis, you've seconded that. So can I ask for any votes against? Any abstentions? Again, that is passed. We will now stop streaming on